That's right.
We'll call to order the February 14th meeting of the Conestoga Valley Board of School Directors. Does the secretary have attendance?
9 directors present.
Thank you. Will you please join me in the pledge of the flag?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to welcome everybody for coming out on such a cold evening. We have a number of people present with presentations tonight. We have a very long agenda, and we do have an executive session later. So I'm requesting that everyone please try to be as succinct as you can, still giving our board members a chance to ask questions and make sure they understand, but to be able to get through this agenda as efficiently as possible. That said, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
The motion is second. We use a voice vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any noes or abstentions? If not, we'll move on to the superintendent's comments.
Thank you, Madam President. I have a couple items of interest. Normally, we have our superintendent report as a consent agenda during our second meeting. We're asking for this out-of-sequence approval for needed ESL coverage, as English is a second language coverage at Fritz. I'll discuss this more at the appropriate agenda item. But while I have your attention focused on personnel issues, I'd like to recognize 2 administrators. First was Sally's resignation as principal at Smoketown, and the district going through the hiring process for her replacement. Taylor Aloisa, our current assistant principal for Smoketown and Fritz, will be the interim principal for Smoketown until a permanent replacement is chosen. We look forward to the stability and leadership that she will continue to bring to Smoketown. And Taylor's back there in the audience. And so, thank you, Taylor, for stepping up. Second, we're bringing in a substitute assistant principal for Taylor's former job. Scott Rank is actually coming home. Scott was a former Fritz Elementary student and a CV graduate. His mom, Linda, was a former Fritz first grade teacher. Scott recently retired as a school administrator for the school district of Lancaster, and we are happy to welcome him back to the CV family as we work through this Smoketown principal hiring process. Welcome back.
Thank you.
And you will also note 3 names highlighted in red in the superintendent's report. These are Millersville students who qualified for the Act 86 substitute program. By adding these names, we can secure more substitutes sooner. That's all for tonight, Madam President.
Okay. Are there any board comments on district activities? If not, are there any comments from anyone in the public? If not, we'll move on to the action discussion items, and I'll just bring to the board's attention that if it says review, it'll be on the consent agenda. If it says approval, then it's an action item. So we'll start with the change orders for the new middle school. Mr. Enderline.
Thank you. Thank you, Board. I have change orders under 2 primes this evening, the general contractor and the electrical contractor. I'll go over the general contractor first, but as always, please interrupt me with questions or comments. I'll just run down the list here. RFP 20 revision 2 reflects costs associated with flat roof substrate remediation. To add to that, we had to add another membrane to some additional wood framing that was needed for proper adhesion of the roof. That is related to, I will skip one here, to 23, that framing I just described to ensure proper termination of the roof as the gable roof comes down to the flat roof. I know I'm getting into the weeds a little bit here. There was some additional framing in review of that condition with the roofer. So those 2 are related. RFP 22 and 24 are also semi-related. As some of you know, I'll give a brief history lesson here. The current middle school principal, Dennis Quirk, was not the principal at the time of design and bid documents. As he has gotten into the documents, he has noticed a few things he would like to tweak. We coordinated those amongst the construction team, and 22 and 24 are some of the items that came out of that. I know 22 is a little bit of an odd duck. The installation of 7 doors. The doors were always in scope. The installation of them was held out to ensure SGI rooms were counted per PDE recommendations. It will not change the building at all. The layout that you are familiar with, that many of you have seen, will still be the same. RFP 24 is a general catch-all to some of those changes I just described that Principal Quirk wanted to see. They run the gamut of a few things: millwork modifications, door hardware modifications, and we rearranged. I shouldn't even say rearranged. There were some minor revisions to some room layouts. There was a singular credit change order under the electrical contract. As you can see, this is related to coordination between Joshua and the subcontractor to the electrician who is doing the TV studio equipment. And much as I said with the principal, Joshua was not with the district when these documents went out to bid, so he's been playing a little bit of catch-up. And in this case, it resulted to the credit to the project. He felt some of that equipment was not needed. So overall, when you put these two together, it is a $1,388.73 addition, which leaves us overall in the project still operating at a negative 0.06% change order rate.
I would just like the board to consider, and I don't know if this would work or not, but if we went back to activating our construction committee, I wonder if some of this detail couldn't be run by them and save all of us a little bit of time. Because
Absolutely.
the final detail of that isn't necessarily board concerns, as long as somebody's taken a look at it. The other thing is, I do hope somebody's keeping track of what is expected changes and which are errors and omissions.
Yes.
Other than that, are there any other questions? Thank you. Then we'll move on to Plan Con F.
Christopher and I discussed this, and just for ease of, since I'm already up here, Christopher can answer any specifics, but generally as an introduction to this, this is what I presented for Smoketown last month. I think everyone was here. So this is the portion of PDE that we submit the construction documents and construction specifications that will be bid. Exact same set of forms, few key differences obviously with Loyola. We will have abatement, for example, under this project because of the existing asbestos. But generally, again, Dr. Z's scrolling through it, it's a breakdown of the individual spaces. And then when we turn this over to PD, we include the bid documents and specifications. But again, Christopher and Don are here to answer any specifics if they come up, but just as means of introduction.
Any questions?
What is PD that you're turning over to?
I'm sorry, what was it?
You said you were turning this over to PD?
PDE,
PD.
Pennsylvania Department of Education.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Superintendent's report, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I'm just gonna go ahead and point out the ones at the bottom there that were listed in red.
Okay. If there are no questions about it, we will take a motion.
I move we approve the superintendent's report.
We have a motion to approve the superintendent's report
Second.
and a second. Would Secretary take roll, please?
Mr. Benigno?
Aye.
Mrs. Kapka?
Aye.
Mr. Talley?
Aye.
Mr. Dillman?
Aye.
Mr. Gensel?
Aye.
Mr. Hurst?
Aye.
Dr. Martin?
Aye.
Ms. Trowbridge?
Aye.
Mrs. Groff?
Aye. Policy review, Mrs. Beverly Fletcher. You seem.
Budget.
Oh, did I-
Budget.
Oh, I'm
Me too.
sorry. I'm sorry. Either way. Mrs.
Either way,
Beverly
you get me.
Fletcher, she's up
Right,
here.
yeah.
We
You
have
have first or
two
you-
parts to this. We have our preliminary budget and related documents, and we have the athletic report. So I don't know which one wants to go first.
Mine will probably take less time.
You can, yeah, no, actually mine's short too, but you go
Why don't do the
ahead, you go
athletic
first.
Because Mrs. Fletcher stays up here for some other things.
Okay.
All right, I'm getting it.
So as he's bringing this up, the first several slides, it was just informational. As you saw, I listed the sports that we carry. I mean, with so many new people, I just wanted to make sure that everybody saw those. And so the sports that we offer, our participation rates, you saw that they did go down a little bit from the last couple of years. My first 3 years, we held pretty steady at 39%, and then last year it dropped. And my guess is just, like we had kids that were doing online learning. We had kids that decided not to play because of COVID. So I'm hopeful that once we figure out the participation rates for this year, that they'll go back up. And then you saw our team GPAs, pictures of our commitment days. And then I wanted to get into talking a little bit about the junior high girls volleyball program. And then the Buckskins Activities Alliance, that was, again, just one slide of information. But if you have any questions about anything before I get to the volleyball program and the budget, I can answer those now. All right, great. So I want to say it's slide 13.
Okay.
There it is. Okay, so as you read, the school board policy on approval of a new sports program, 2 years successful history in Conestoga Valley as a club sport. The junior high girls volleyball program started in 2012, so we've had a good 11 successful years. Inclusion as a PIAA sanctioned athletic activity, it absolutely is, and we've been following PIAA rules with this club program in that we have been requiring the sports physicals. We do the academic eligibility checks for them every week. We already have a full schedule for them. So they have been well on their way to transitioning to a new sports program. And as you can see, the roster size is there. So we're carrying full teams to be able to fill a junior high varsity and a junior high JV team. And then the budget costs that are associated with carrying this program, you can see there. Officials, uniforms, a tournament, the supplies, transportation, which I don't know those numbers, but the transportation is kind of all clumped into one. And then our coaches, that's the range there from step 1 to step 20. And yeah, no, and the other, I mean, what I wanted to say then was that we were going to bring this for approval next week. Is that correct, Dr. Z?
Yes.
So, yep, so we wanted to bring this forward for approval next week to approve the new sports program. And that's it. Any questions on junior high volleyball, girls volleyball?
Do you realize that this is not the first time that we were presented with this option of making junior high volleyball an approved extracurricular activity?
No, in fact, I was wondering why it hadn't been approved yet since it had been a club for 12 years. So I thought, why hasn't anybody brought this forward yet?
They brought it forward, and
Okay.
It took several weeks and a lot of discussions, and it was turned down. And I'm still of that same mindset. I'm a little concerned with how fast and large our sports program is getting as far as costs. Over the last maybe 5 years, 4 years, the part of the budget that comes out of our general fund has grown twice as fast as our general budget has. And I'm just not sure I'm comfortable with continuing or accelerating that growth in costs. Is this for girls and boys?
This is for girls. As you can see, it's pretty minimal compared to some of the other programs that we have. And it's also just a great opportunity for continued competitive involvement for these kids, giving them the opportunity to stay active and to be focused. The volleyball program is actually one of the most popular programs that we have from junior high and high school. There are 6 in volleyball. You allow 6 kids on the court at a time competing in the games. And we had over 40 girls try out for the high school team. Same number of boys that tried out for the boys soccer team when you have 11 people on the field. This is an extremely popular sport, and I feel like we need to recognize the demand and grant the children what they want. I mean, this is something that's extremely popular among the girls, and girls especially, to get, you know, to give them those opportunities to be in a sport, and you know, knowing how much a sport helps with their self-esteem and their confidence, and just staying active and healthy. I think that this is a wonderful opportunity for them.
Well, I understand all the advantages and don't question the advantages of being part of a team and such. I just question whether or not we need to make this a school-sponsored activity at this level, especially considering, for me at least, this came out of nowhere. I didn't know this was in the works. And I'm not sure I'm prepared, because if the girls do this, my guess is then the boys will.
Well, I'm sure that they will want to. I know that the boys' coach has talked about trying to start a club, but they haven't gotten it off the ground.
I have faith that they will, if they think it's going to be eventually, you know, financed by the district. So this amount will double. And we're already putting, as far as I'm concerned, a huge amount of money, not that it isn't worth it, not that it doesn't have a value, but the over $900,000 that comes out of our general fund to subsidize the athletic budget, I think has already grown very fast. So I personally, it's not that I dislike volleyball, and it's not that I don't think it has its value, and I would rather see that stay as a club, because once you start expanding this into junior high, you're going to have more and more sports and more teams wanting the same privileges. That's just from my point of view.
You're right, that makes sense. I agree with you 100%. That you have one, you have another, and you have another, and another, and it just continues.
Yeah, this is not just a $8,000-10,000
Correct.
investment. This will go. Once you approve this one, you're going to have a lot of trouble saying there's no precedent to approve the boys and then any other sport.
Well, we already have a lot of the other sports, so I don't know that many more will follow. I mean, and I don't think we're looking at another and another and another. I think that we might be looking at boys and girls volleyball because we have those high school programs. Typically you're going to have junior high programs that mirror the high school programs. And we don't in some of these sports, volleyball being one of them.
Yeah, well, what we found before was, when we were talking about it, is there were other people lined up paying attention to try to get the club started, you know, with that being the ultimate goal. That's just my perspective. I understand yours.
Well, I would say the difference is that the process in place is that you have to go 2 years as a club and show sustainability. And they've gone 11 years showing sustainability. If you want to call past practice, boys volleyball could go 11 years before you have to decide again. It's just that you have a junior high basketball team for both boys and girls. You have a junior high football team for boys only. What other sports are at the junior high level?
Junior high field hockey, junior high track and field, junior high soccer, boys and girls.
Is there baseball?
No, baseball and softball we don't have, and we probably will not have. But those are probably the only two. The rest of the sports we would have.
I just want to make sure all the information gets out.
You know, I don't know that the boys should necessarily have to do 11 years again, because we have a policy that says 2 years.
Right.
So, you know, that's the way it is. I will add this, just as a footnote. I think CV should be especially proud of its athletic program. For schools of our size, with our population, we probably have as many or more as any of the other schools. And I think it's been an excellent opportunity. And these last few years, it has grown a bit, which was always one of my concerns. We add sports, but we wouldn't add more athletes. But we've been able to do that to some extent. That 37% or so, I think, is admirable. But are there any other concerns?
I have a quick question. On the summary of athletic costs by sport, these are all the sports that we offer, correct? Like rifle is a sport that we offer. Is there any chance in, like if you're saying volleyball, which is a team sport, and I can see it be having more benefit than a rifle sport, kind of thing, or golf or something like that, where it's not as much of like a team building. You get all the other benefits of being on a team and working together and stuff like that. Is there a way, could we possibly switch sport, like?
Yeah, we'll have a phone call sent to you.
Yeah, I'm sure it would be incredibly unpopular, I'm not
Right,
arguing
no.
that, but I'm also saying denying it can be unpopular also.
Here's how I look at that team. People who play on a team where they're all interacting at one time have one perception of what team means. We have bowling, which is a team sport.
Correct.
Don't underestimate the difference between everyone being on the field or the playing area at one time, from still being able to develop a sense of team.
But is there a way that we could
Much like
get,
track is one
Right,
person at a
yes.
time. We're not going to get rid of track because they don't play as a traditional
correct,
unified
I'm just
team.
pointing out one aspect to it, and also is there a way that we could see the interest level of these different things? If you have one of these sports that has a very low interest level and compared to girls volleyball or something that we could then
I see
maybe
what you're
swap
getting,
out or
and
something
for me,
instead?
just the opposite is true. It's the idea of serving every student every day. We have some students who are not the typical athlete,
Right,
okay? But there are team activities that allow them all the advantages of what we classify as athletics. When we added bowling, which was one that I thought was wonderful because it brought in a whole new set of kids who had never been involved with athletics or team sports, and gave them that great opportunity to understand what that was about. Rifle is another one. It's not only how many kids are interested, it's a different group of kids who get to learn those lessons.
yes, and I understand that, and trust me, I'm all for rifle, all sports, rifle, golf, and all that kind of stuff, but when you're trying to decide this or that, and the benefit of overall students and stuff like that, I just didn't know if we could look at the number of
Well,
students that.
the board has that option. I'm not sure how we go about deauthorizing a sport, but I don't know if anybody else would embrace that idea or not.
Well, I don't know if necessarily getting rid of a sport, but is there a way that we can get a list of what the interest is per sport that we have? I mean,
Well, the report you have shows how many kids.
oh yeah, duh. Never mind, you're
It's
right.
the additional pages.
I'm sorry, you're
Yeah.
correct. I apologize.
How are we with middle school girls volleyball with other local schools, like like Hempfield and Pequot Valley, do they have girls volleyball? in middle
They
school?
do, and actually, that was one thing that I was going to mention, because if the concern is that we'll be, if we say yes to girls volleyball, then we'll have to say yes to so many others. The thing is that, like rifle, bowling, baseball, softball, our Lancaster Lebanon League, we do not sponsor junior high sports in those sports. So as a result, we wouldn't have anybody to play. So, and even boys volleyball, there's no middle school boys volleyball teams to play right now either. Junior high girls volleyball is the only sport that our league schools have that we don't carry at CV. So I'm trying to think, it was rifle, bowling, baseball, softball. I need to see the list of sports up there, but, so some of the other ones where you might say, well, now, this group is gonna wanna make a club and then make a sport. Well, we won't have anybody to play in some of those because our league doesn't have those sports, but in volleyball they do. I have a full schedule for them in our league, if they're just league teams.
Yeah, that's my
And if I'm
concern
correct,
that
That's
we're,
one of the requirements for us to approve it, that it
Okay.
has to be there.
that's what I wanna be,
And it usually
competitive.
comes to all the schools at once. When something like it starts, I'm not saying that it's not out there now, but, once that's added, then the other schools as a group, I believe will eventually, do the same thing. Are there any other questions?
I just had a quick question,
Sure.
and I apologize, I was a music kid in school.
That's okay, you don't have to apologize for
Yeah,
that.
I played T-ball
Me
and I was
too,
like, yeah,
I
now-
sang.
Yeah, that was me, I sang and acted, that was a full head of hair and 80 pounds ago.
I played Dorothy in Wizard of Oz.
I was Danny Zuko my senior year in Greece, so.
Oh, nice.
Not tooting.
That explains a lot.
Yeah, no, that does explain a lot. That's why I'm extroverted. But if you could just explain real quickly, just because I'm trying to familiar myself, like so this has been a club for 11 years. Other than the school sponsoring it and obviously becoming an official team to belong to, what are the benefits of going from club to school? Just briefly, just so I can wrap my head around that.
Well, I mean, obviously, the financing of it,
Yeah.
so that they can be provided with the things that they need. It's very difficult for booster clubs to constantly be raising money year after year to finance the club. And the booster club really isn't, the booster club is there to finance the team, the teams that are there, and this is a club, and, so they're just taking that on, saying, absolutely, we want to try to help, because this is the feeder program into the varsity program. So, I mean, so obviously the financial help, and then again, just being able to recognize that they have that full schedule, that they have, all of the benefits of being recognized as a team, whether it's being able to go to tournaments, whether it's being able to go to any sort of junior high championships that might be offered, anything like that.
Gotcha, thank you. Yeah, that helps me understand.
Any other questions?
And just one more point of clarification, the budget that we presented here is around 200,000 out of our $75 million budget. 200,000 of it goes to athletics.
That's what's the athletic department budget. Then there's the amount that comes out of the general fund, which is much higher. It was last year, last number I have anything for is 1920, it was $925,117. But people don't realize how much of the athletic budget comes out of the general fund. Because you'll find, because I remember when I first came on the board, year after year, the athletic budget stayed the same, and I kept thinking, that can't be. When I dug deeper, I realized that was just the part that you control and schedule. The rest comes out of the general fund.
To the tune of about $175,000 in salaries, benefits, and probably some transportation costs?
$175,000, which the general fund transfers over, and then in addition to that, there's the salaries, transportation, some other cost benefits.
Maintenance, facilities, and so forth.
So Dr. Z, can you go back to the slide that shows the draft budget for the volleyball program?
13, something like that.
Yeah, so if I add those numbers up, I think, so the uniforms is a one-time cost, maybe recurring every.
Every like 5 or 6 years,
Right.
yeah.
Cycle.
So adding those numbers up at the high end, it's 10 grand, right?
Mhm.
Which is roughly 5% of the overall athletic, the $200,000, right?
Mhm.
For a program that's shown sustained interest for the past 11 years.
Mhm.
So if we're providing opinions, my opinion is there's sustained interest for a 5% cost on a program that I think teaches kids a lot. So I think there's value in seriously considering adding it to our supported program.
Any other questions? Decision action item will require a motion. Or are we going to put that on next week?
Yes, that's next
What?
week.
Yeah, next week. Yep.
Is that for next week?
Yeah.
Yes, but do you want some flexibility for a roll call vote?
Well, we can make it a separate vote next week if.
We can make it a separate vote next week, probably
Yeah.
should.
Yeah, okay. We'll adjust the
We'll take it out of consent.
the consent agenda for that,
Yep.
absolutely. Is that everything?
It is, unless you have questions about the budget numbers that I have here.
I think we're good.
Okay,
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
you're very welcome. Thank you for your time.
Phyllis?
Yes, ma'am. So hopefully everybody saw attached to your agenda should also be an athletic by sport report that has all the sports, the numbers. It's
Yeah.
nice history so you can see.
What's really interesting in that is finding out which sports cost the most per student.
It's
That's
football,
always a surprise.
Well, it's football, I would
it's
think.
football.
No, that's what everybody thinks.
And then it's field hockey's next.
No, I think it used to be basketball. I don't know if it still is, but at one time, basketball was the most expensive per student participating, because so few students participated.
Basketball is.
Now, the last time I did that math was, years ago,
Yeah.
so that may have changed.
Baseball, basketball's 1,200. And football's 15, almost 1,600
Okay,
per student.
awfully close
And
though,
then,
isn't it?
It fluctuates.
Yeah,
field
it does
hockey.
fluctuate.
Yeah, it's good, it's within plus or minus.
Yeah, it's always,
Like
it always
10%.
surprises me, you know, how expensive some of them are. That doesn't make them more or less important or impactful.
Yeah,
Are
It's
you,
just a footnote.
what's that?
The preliminary budget?
it's not up. All right, so I just wanted
Sunrise
to,
or a sunset?
yeah, it's a beautiful sunset. Okay,
Probably
so,
sunrise.
Is your glass half full or half empty today?
I can never tell which one it is.
it's, mine's usually half
Half full?
full. Yeah.
Just checking.
So I just wanted to draw your attention that report's there. If you want to take a look at it, if you have any questions, let us know. Okay, next item. Preliminary budget, this is an approval item. You have a recommended action, 2 motions on your agenda. If Dr. Z wants to pull up the PowerPoint, which is the second, yep, there you go. What I normally try to do here is save you from having to go back to look at old presentations to find out where we are. So if you didn't notice, as you flip through the first several slides of this presentation, it's just a recapitulation of the timeline, a reminder of what the index is. I pull forward the revenues and expenses that we covered in January, and then the summary, so you can kind of see where we were when we last left you. And then the very next slide should give you the updates since the draft that you saw in January. So very minor changes. The one big deadline that we hit from the January draft preliminary budget to what you have in front of you tonight is that the retirement date for our professional staff has come and gone. So what we have done with that is adjusted the expense number to account for those retirements. At this point, what we're assuming is that we are replacing all the positions. We don't know just what yet, but there are attritional savings from, somebody higher on the salary chart probably being replaced, maybe not at a starting salary, but somebody that's lower on the salary chart. So that's what drives that number. And then the other big change that we have to do for the PDE, the Pennsylvania Department of Education 2028 form that we have to complete, is we actually have to put the Act 1 index and the exception numbers into the revenue number so you can sort of see. So we are now not only off by 2.5 million as that may look. That is assuming that you would go the full boat on the index and the exceptions. We totally understand that's not where we're going to be, but that's the way we have to show it. So don't be nervous about that. It's just how the form needs to be completed. So in the next slide then should just be, I tried to highlight the areas where we made the changes. So on the revenue side, on the expense side, it's hitting that salary and then the corresponding benefits. I didn't enter the slide here, but on the revenue side, we do get a portion back from the state on the Social Security and the retirement. It's 50%, so you'll see 50% of the change actually on the revenue side of those numbers as well. So those are all the changes, pretty simple from January to February this year, so that was nice. It's not always that simple and clean. And again, as I've said before, we've already started to dive into our budget meetings this month with the intent to bring you something back in May that looks very different than this as we continue to collect data. And that should be it, just some repeats of other data. Any questions on that? If not, we do need to approve it tonight because the state sets the time frame. As you saw in the budget timeline, and so we can't wait till next meeting next week, next Tuesday, because we'll be past the date.
I have just one question. There was a number that I haven't seen this year, and that was the tip number. Do you know what that is offhand?
140?
I would say about 100. Yeah, 100.
About $140,000.
Thank you. But that sure has grown, hasn't it?
It has.
What does that number represent?
That's a tax, what's that called?
Tax increment financing, and it's a zone that the township created out on Route 30 where they're working on, if you've noticed, as some of those businesses have changed over, the signage has changed. They're actually narrowing the driving lanes to create a sidewalk and a path on the side to be able to have a bike path for people to either walk or bike. And so the county has a contribution to it, the school district and the township, of course, contributes as well. It goes into a separate fund, it's an authority fund, so they can't use it for operating expenses, they have to use it for that program. But we committed to that 6 years ago?
Something like that.
5 or 6 years ago. And so each cycle they bill us, and it started out, oh my goodness, tens of thousands of dollars, and over the past several years, it's grown to 140,000.
And grew exponentially. Basically, we're allowing some of what would be school property taxes and turning it over to East Lampeter Township for their programs. Needless to say, there was an argument about passing that. But it was passed, and so every year it has now grown to $140,000, and it's a 20-year agreement.
It is a 20-year, so.
So who knows what.
So we only have
another
15 more
5
years to go. Cup half full,
Yeah, but
Mr.
that
Talley, cup
doesn't
half full.
necessarily guarantee that they will at all, because it's only on the increased amount of taxes that their improvements bring about.
Correct.
Businesses were against it at the time. We partnered with the township to do this. And so far, I don't know if any money has been put into any program, specific program for improvements along the strip.
Yeah, they're working through the improvements. I can't tell you how much physical capital stuff has been done, but
Yeah.
they are definitely working towards that.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Other than, I just thought we should know, because, you know, that's a long-term commitment that we have no control over.
It is.
Are we ready to make our motions? I need 2 motions. The first is to pass the preliminary budget.
Make a motion to pass a preliminary budget.
Have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Second. Could we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Benigno?
Aye.
Mrs. Kappa?
Aye.
Mr. Talley?
Aye.
Mr. Dillman?
Aye.
Mr. Gensel?
Aye.
Mr. Hurst?
Aye.
Dr. Martin?
Aye.
Ms. Trowbridge?
Aye.
Mrs. Groff?
Aye. The second motion that we need is a motion to approve the budget resolution and related notices. Doesn't anybody want to speak that motion?
So motion.
Yes. I'll second that one.
Yeah.
Whatever it was.
What you just said, so motion.
Oh, jeez.
Okay, we have a motion to approve
The budget
the
resolution. and
budget
notice.
resolution and notices. We have a second.
Second.
We have another roll call, please.
Mr. Benigno?
Aye.
Mrs. Kappa?
Aye.
Mr. Talley?
Aye.
Mr. Dillman?
Aye.
Mr. Gensel?
Aye.
Mr. Hurst?
Aye.
Dr. Martin?
Aye.
Ms. Trowbridge?
Aye.
Mrs. Groff?
Aye.
Sam wrote it down. What you needed. I wrote it down what you needed. So
Oh,
I was prepared.
I was prepared too. I was going to try to do that off the top of my head. Is that everything?
So before we leave that item, I also attached to your agenda the spreadsheet, the 5-year projection spreadsheet is updated as well to match.
Thank you.
The one additional change that did not show up in the PowerPoint, because we're looking at the 22-23 year, is in the 21-22 estimate. You will notice the revenue number has changed because we updated the real estate number, so just so you're aware of that. So that is now everything for the budget.
Okay.
Policy.
Wow.
All
Okay,
right,
thank
we'll-
you.
We'll do policy next.
Okay, yeah, policy
Okay.
next. We have, what is it, 5 policies, 4 or 5?
4.
4, and they're minor changes, if I'm correct, basically
They are.
related to the law.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Z, you want me to start with the 600s and then you'll, okay.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna do the first one, use of one-time revenue sources. So we are actually one of the few districts that have this policy. Interestingly enough, if you look at the date on it in 2011, I was not here then, but I can almost guarantee you that the reason that the policy was put in place is because the last recession that we went through, the federal government issued what were called ERA funds to school districts, and the ERA funds were also a one-time revenue. So as you've heard us talk about ESSER funds and the ESSER funds being one-time revenue, and we kind of talk about that like we've been through it before. We sort of have, because we've been through this exercise. So two very minor changes to that, and they're really just wording changes. It seemed a little clunky in the purpose of the policy, not the fund, is to limit the use of one-time revenues for ongoing expenses, and that the policy serves to minimize disruptive effects. I think that's pretty intuitive, that, you know, if you're plugging one-time revenues in and out of the budget, the stuff that happens downstream from that sort of gets all convoluted, and you can put something in place and then have to sort of yank it out later, and that's not great, obviously, for the educational program. So those are all the changes to that, but if you look for this policy on somebody else's website, you're probably not going to find it, because we had a hard time finding any samples to look at other than our own. Any questions on that one? Because the next two sort of go together. Okay, so the next two, back in 2015-16, the federal government issued some what were originally called uniform grant guidance. It's now just, and it was UGG, UGG. It's still UGG, but it's only UG, uniform guidance. And the guidance is put in place really to administer how we deal with federal funds. So Dr. Kozer sits next to me because we sat down and looked at these policies collectively. And the 626 one is very general. The 627 one specifically deals with travel reimbursement. And so again, a couple of minor changes to the 627 one, not the 627.1. We made some title changes on that one. And then we had referred to the record keeping as a records retention schedule. We're going to refer to that as a records management plan instead. That's in line with the PSBA guidance. The biggest change that we're making to this policy, Dr. Z, if you scroll the whole way up to authority. So the second line there where it says superintendent or designee, so this is kind of getting our policy in line with the practice that we actually follow. So as we apply for and receive federal funds through the state, our process is that there's actually a package software called eGrants that you go in to do that. We do all that work administratively. The way you approve the funds and how they're spent is actually through the budget. So, I mean, I'm sure you guys have been following along as we've been doing all this ESSER stuff. We've been showing you where it goes in on the revenue side, where it's going to be spent on the expense side. But when we go actually and put all the narrative and the same budget and all the details into the eGrant system, we don't like print a report out of the system and show it to you. We certainly can do that, but at that point, you've already approved what the budget looks like. We're just handling the administrative function. So we actually got on the phone with our federal programs liaison today and asked this question because our current policy says the board shall review, and we wanted to make sure that we could actually change it to superintendent or designee, which is what we saw in some of the other policies, and she confirmed that we can. She said actually many districts, that's the way they do it the way we do it. It's an administrative function. It happens as part of our guidance of getting everything in place, and that you approve it through the budget. So that is the one substantial, I would say, change to this policy. It's not sort of all encompassing. It's really a couple of words, but it definitely does kind of change. It matches our practice with the policy, and so we'll be following it.
And the governance is still in that first sentence where the board
correct
ensures. So that we're just going through that process.
Okay. Anything I missed on that one? No, we're good? Okay. And then the other one is the 627.1, which is the travel reimbursement. And again, other than just a couple of cleanup things, this one hasn't changed. And those are both policies that are required that they will look when they come in to do monitoring to make sure that we have them and that we follow them. Anything else I missed?
You hit it.
Okay.
All right, next one. We good on that? Any questions for
Nope.
Okay.
Thanks.
Next one is 901, Public Information Program, and I work with oh my gosh, Katie. Back there. Who's our PR director. And what we did is we looked at other districts as well as PSBA, and we tied in our communications plan and put a lot of the wording that's in our communications plan in this policy.
Any questions? I guess we're ready to put those on the consent agenda?
Yes,
for next
ma'am.
month? Okay, we are down to, the first bid.
That'd be Josh.
Josh?
Good evening, board. So before you have a bid recommendation letter for a component of the technology for the new middle school. It's called Crestron because that is the actual manufacturer of the specific product. As the letter details, we submitted this out, been working on it for a few months, submitted it out in December. Pretty much had the whole package written up. All vendors had to do was actually put together pricing, installation and programming costs. If anybody's interested, the document's actually on the district website under the business office bids. All the relevant details there as well. We received two on the date of February 4th and opening them up, you have copies of both. They had to submit their attachment B, which was their overall pricing form. As you can see, recommendation is to go with Sage, as they are clearly the more economical vendor on the product. Something important to note, Sage is also the audio subcontractor through the general contractor for a separate component piece that was actually on the bid documents. So as I like to say, I finally get to say this, I've got one neck to wring if nothing works out right when it comes to the technology, which is good from my standpoint, but regardless of who would have actually hit the financial marks, we wanted to go with the lowest bidder, so.
And we're convinced that the quality is still there.
Yes, so the product is identical. It's actually the manufacturer requires that we have to go through a vendor. There's a price lock for education programs under the manufacturer, which was kind of nice going into this. So the way it really works is manufacturers have a price. There's the price caps, education, and anywhere within that, they are allowed to figure out how much of a hit they want to take.
Right.
And then come up with the price, and then there's certain things. So prevailing wage was included as well for all the installation services. So this is a hefty portion. Funding for this is directly from the FF&E, furniture, fixtures, and equipment, earmarked under the technology portion that I have, so.
And for the board's information, the process here is, we have to give permission before bids go out. That was done under construction. Then the bids come in and there are those guidelines for, low bid and quality.
Yep.
Any questions? If not, that will go on the consent agenda.
Perfect.
And
Thank
we'll
you.
have technology in the school.
Yes.
Dr. Mann, calendar recommendations for next school year.
I recommend that we have one.
We're in school next year.
That's right. All right, well, good evening, everyone. Allow me a minute or two just to explain to you, the new folks on the board, the process that we go through. We have a district calendar committee that consists of approximately 20 people. It's made up of teachers, a union representative who's on the committee as a representative, administrators, a board member, Dr. Martin, and community members like businesses, people, and so it's a fairly large committee. Like I said, approximately 20 people, and those folks have been on there for since the last comprehensive plan. So people come and go, but it's a fairly consistent committee. We typically have 3 meetings, and we meet the first meeting, the agenda I give is kind of just review. All right, feedback on the current calendar, general discussion, comments of that nature, which leads to the second committee meeting, which the people are to go out and talk to their constituents, get some feedback on things that perhaps we discussed that we need some feedback on. And then based on those ideas, I put together some drafts of different things to take a look at. And then we discuss those drafts at the second meeting. And sometimes we finish there. Past couple of years, we've been going to the third meeting, and then we narrow it down. I informed the committee that it's their charge to make a recommendation. They're not making the calendar, they're making a recommendation to the district administration, who in turn now is recommending that to you. because there may be things that we administratively think, you know what, that's not going to work, or whatever, as we go through the process. So that's kind of just a little bit of background, okay? So I also tell the committee that there's no perfect calendar. You're never going to please everyone.
Or if there is, next year it won't be.
That's right, yeah, exactly. So just a couple points of interest to highlight here for you is that the first day of school would be August the 24th. And, you know, again, those dates kind of fluctuate depending on different activities that are going on and where the holidays fall. That fluctuates, you know, a couple days either way. A couple things of interest there. You go back to prior to Keystone exams being administered, it wasn't as much of an issue because you had PSSA testing, but you tried to get as much instructional time in front of the assessments. And with the Keystone exams, the high school block scheduling, those exams, there's two testing windows. There's three actually testing windows. There's one in early December for some districts. And then there's a second testing window, which is January, which is the one we take advantage of because it matches our semesters. And then there's the final testing window, which is the spring semester, again, matches our semesters. So point is, you try and balance the instructional time so that you have as much, and it's between those two, if that makes sense. All right, so to keep that moving. So again, depending on where holidays fall, that start date fluctuates a little bit. The other thing just to keep in mind is our students go and attend other programs. So whether it's IU programming or a big one would be the CTC. So you need to keep in mind, where does the CTC start? Because you don't want to start too soon before that because they're not in session yet. So all those things come into play. So that's the month of August. We have PD Day set up there. The instructional time is set up there, and you can see the first day of instruction there. September is pretty straightforward. You have your Labor Day holiday. The 16th is an early dismissal, and the 19th is a PC, stands for Professional Collaboration Day. We have 3 of those in the contract. And so then October, again, pretty standard as far as days off and PD time. I will use this opportunity to point something out. One of the things that the committee discussed was trying to provide a balance and consistency with early dismissals, one for parents and one also for teachers. And so new to this calendar this year is early dismissals identified as teacher directed. And the intent there is that they are just that, teacher directed. You know, we're not going to come in administratively and say, here's what's happening on those. Now, don't get me wrong, we have some of those. We kept those in the calendar, but we identified a couple where we're saying these are teacher directed. And we tried to put them as close to like the end of a quarter or end of a trimester as best we could, so that the time could be used for whether it's needed for report cards or you know, communicating with parents, you know, at those unique periods of time. So we'll see how that goes. But we added those. So October, you can note there is one. So that's why I wanted to point that out. November, here's probably one of the biggest changes. You know, hold on to your seats. The week of Thanksgiving. One of the challenges that we face is parent-teacher conferences. And, you know, not to get into a discussion or a debate on the pros and cons of that, but just the nature of the parent-teacher conferences. Historically at Conestoga Valley, that's been an elementary experience. We've not had it at the secondary level at all. With the new middle school coming online, so 6th grade moving up, and teachers having that experience, and if a new building, Mr. Quirk and I discussed the idea around, you know what, maybe to try that this year at the middle level, because of those new issues there. Not to mention, it's just another time to get parents in that building, new building, you know, I think it's just a good experience. The challenge is what to do at the high school, because as you recall, this year we had a staggered start, and the reason we did that was because you try and keep the instructional ties lined up because of the contract. You just got to be careful with that. So what we did here, 2 things. One is on the 21st of November and the 22nd is parent-teacher conferences and a professional collaboration day. So at the elementary level, there would be parent-teacher conferences on the 21st, and most likely the 22nd, that lead over into that. The middle level, the 21st, possibly the 22nd, depending on how many folks we engage in that. If there's time remaining, it moves into the professional collaboration time. At the high school, because we're not having parent-teacher conferences at the high school, what we're going to do on the 21st is actually have what's going to be like industry tours. So the idea there is that we're going to, as soon as if the calendar gets approved as is, we're going to start putting together a committee, which ties into our comprehensive plan and looking at industry and standards and career work standards, and identify corporations in our community that we can take the high school staff. And again, initial planning, initial thoughts in my mind is that we'll have teachers attend at least two site visits in the morning, get back here right after lunch, and then we're going to debrief and work in small groups on, all right, now what does this mean for us as far as instruction is concerned, and then use that to build upon as we keep looking at real world application to our teaching and learning.
Is this like the old BIE days?
What's that?
Is this like the old BIE days?
Yeah, so.
Old is new again.
Yeah, exactly right. You wait around long enough, it'll come back around. So we'll see how that goes. It may be not a big fail, I don't think it will be, but so that keeps us aligned instructional time, and it keeps the staff, aligned as far as the contract is concerned. So that's November. Now, one last big piece with November is, you'll notice the 28th is an instructional day. Historically, that's been a day off. Again, depending on the year, depending on the number of instructional days, whether it's 180 days or 183, instruction, we've gone up to the 23rd. We've had school on the 23rd, but that Monday has historically been off. The rationale here is, by putting those 2 days in that front week, in the week of the 21st, putting another day at the 28th just seems excessive for that holiday, if you want to call it, or that break.
That holiday, that official state holiday, the first day of deer hunting?
That's right, that's right.
It's not.
It's
No.
not anymore.
Not
Not anymore.
Saturday.
It's Saturday.
Yeah.
And I saw that most hunters are recommending to take Saturday. Just saw it in the paper this past weekend.
Here's my question on that. I know it started off to be, the Monday for hunting. Some people try to wallpaper it over and call it, it's actually so the women can go shopping. But what it always meant to me was, the heaviest travel day of the year is Thanksgiving weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a lot of students who going home for the holidays means traveling. And by having that Monday without school, kept a lot of our people off of those overly crowded and dangerous roads after the holiday. And I always thought that was important.
Mm-hmm.
And now we lose that. They will be traveling over the Thanksgiving weekend.
If they choose to. Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. It's
That was an
it's
advantage,
highest.
a worthwhile advantage that we lose with this.
So so I wanted to point that out. So that is a big difference. Now, I did, as part of getting teacher feedback, we did ask, and we sent out a survey, and it was two things. One of the initial drafts that I developed had us working on December 23rd and January 2nd. And so as we discussed and went through these different things, the idea was, well, if we go with this here, looking at, do we take off the 28th, which I wouldn't recommend, and or January 2nd. And so we gave the staff some ideas and feedback, and the feedback was, well, January 2nd seems to make the most sense. So we got feedback from the staff on that as a whole. December, early dismissal and the holiday break. Pretty straightforward there. January, another little unique thing. Here, when we come back, the green is the Keystone exams. I mentioned Keystone exams. That's the window the state gives us. We can't, that's not our pick, that's their dates. And so when we come back from the break, we will develop our schedule and have them internally. January 16th is Martin Luther King Day, and January 20th is the the high school clerical day. Again, I went back and looked at some calendars, and we've done this in the past, where we've separated two. And the reason for that is to keep that balance between the semesters, because if, when we can, we'd like to keep it with Martin Luther King Day weekend. But it would really mess up the numbers too much. So we did this, plus, another big thing I'm real excited about is the 19th. We're gonna have a high school only early dismissal. And we're going to use that in preparation for that evening. We're gonna do a community expo, creative minds, like we did a smaller one over here, but we're gonna do the whole building. So.
Been a couple of years since we had one of those.
Mhm.
That was excellent.
Yeah, but we're gonna engage everyone. The goal this time is to engage everyone.
Wow.
So more to come, but as soon as, again, this gets approved, that a second committee will get started on planning and preparation for that. So we're really excited about that. All right, so that's January. February, pretty straightforward. We have the President's Day piece there, or dismissal, professional collaboration, President's Day. March, pretty straightforward. We do put a day in there as far as a break again, and trying to put those in. April, again, you have the holiday break there, and then you see the yellow starting. The yellow is PSSA testing, so that first week in April is ELA, then it goes to math and science, and May, the week of the 8th, is what the state calls makeup window. And then the green would be our Keystone exam, so that's there. And then Memorial Day weekend. This puts us at the last day of school on the 6th of June. And then as far as makeup days are concerned, we start, in identifying in the event we have another hurricane issue or whatever. I forget what happened this year. Was it a hurricane? So we identify those, and then we work our way through the calendar and pick and choose, and again, to try and maintain that balance as much as possible as we make up days if we need to.
Graduation on a Tuesday?
Mhm. Yep.
We may not run into the fight that we've had and who gets to church first.
Well, I have a feeling a lot of people are gonna like graduation weekend. But the calendar's always, I would recommend, and I'm sure you've already thought of this, that business, day that you wanted to put in for staff is to make sure you involved our business roundtable folks in that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Oh, yeah. Yep. That's why.
I like the idea that it's tied to a program. It's going to be directly related and focused on curriculum.
Yep. Questions?
Nobody's objecting.
So, just so I'm clear, this is the recommendation coming from the committee?
Yes, with a couple little tweaks. Tweaks meaning, I found an error when I counted up the days, so I had to move something, but, yeah.
By contract, teachers work 190 and students have to go to school 180.
This committee has been a huge help in focusing on our professional development. By having the teachers help schedule it, they know when they need it and how to apply it. It's been a really useful committee. And we have found some future board members come off that committee too. Thank you.
Highlight August 24th, dark blue.
Dark blue. Oh, the first day?
Yeah.
Yep.
People are color coded. It's amazing how people, they don't read the sides, they just read the, they just look at the colors.
I'm sorry, what?
People just look at the colors, they don't read the side.
Oh, yeah.
So, just color code the first day of school.
Yeah.
You're making a pretty color.
Something exciting.
Yeah.
Not something dark.
It is exciting.
Yay, they go back to school.
Okay.
Thank you, Don.
Mrs. Heverly Flesher, tax collector deputization.
Yep, I'm back for the next two items. So first, just a little piece of history on this one. So every 4-year cycle, in the odd year, which would be the election year, we have to set the tax collector rate prior to the election, so any tax collector who's running would know what the rate would be. And then after the election happens and people are seated, we come back and the school has the ability to do what's called have that tax collector deputize us to collect our own taxes. So obviously, tax collector is a municipal thing, but in our case and in many of the districts here in the county and the IU, we all collect our own taxes. The municipalities don't do that for us. In our case, our municipalities actually, through a variety of mechanisms, and if you want to know the details, I'll tell you, but a variety of mechanisms go through the process of assigning their taxes to be collected by the county. So when we were looking at our deputization process, I was actually kind of hopeful that we could do just one agreement with the county. We can't because there are 3 individual townships, so you do have 3 agreements. This is for action tonight because of the way the calendar lays out. It kind of matches up with that preliminary budget approval. So again, if we wait till next week, we'll be past the calendar or the date that I have on the PDE calendar. I have sent these 3 agreements to the county treasurer's office. They are going to sign them. You have the unsigned ones because I don't have the signed ones back yet, but they're agreeable. So they will allow us to collect the taxes for the school district. And once we get the signed agreements back, we'll have Mrs. Graff sign them and then we'll be ready. But you do need to approve these 3 agreements.
Okay. Mrs. Martin, do you know if I can do this as a voice vote?
Is there money involved? It's usually.
No.
No, it's a collection of our taxes. It's not a
Okay.
contract.
All right, I could use a motion to approve the tax collector deputization forms.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion to approve these forms. All in favor, say aye, please.
Aye.
Any noes or abstentions? If not, it passes.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Okay, so next item on the agenda is the work experience job training agreement with the IU. And this is new for us, but essentially what it will enable us to do is have high school students engage in basically like kind of like an apprenticeship program. So there'll be trainees. Dr. Zeep, well, if you could just, yep, no. Business agrees, there you go, thank you, sir. Kind of says custodial food service, probably not so much maintenance because that's a little bit more of a skill set based type of thing, but definitely custodial food service. It'll allow our kids here at CV to get some real world job experience. And for that, we have a transitions person here who works with us. We also have a person at the IU. And we pay a stipend, and so we don't actually pay the students, we pay the IU for this service, and the IU takes care of kind of all the back end. So they do this with a number of businesses in the community, but as we've been trying to troubleshoot how can we solve some of our staffing issues, one of the ideas actually 2 ideas that came up. One was actually hiring students to work after school in some of the jobs, and we're well on our way to that piece as well. But in this particular instance, doing the same thing through the IU that would be during the school day program to get the kids some experience, and then the IU would take over the administration of it. So again, they do this with a number of businesses, the grocery outlet, and that's one that comes to the top of my mind right now that was on the list. The way the stipend is arrived at is they basically, the IU figures out what they're going to pay the students. We figure out the schedule. So the folks at the high school kind of worked through, sort of already surveyed the kids and said who's interested, how many hours based upon their schedule. So they still have to do their regular academic work, but how many hours could they do? Most of them, it's going to be an hour or 2 on any given day. They add all of that up, multiply it by the rate, and that's what the stipend's going to be. So we're still kind of working through the details. So the only blank that is not completed on this on this form, and I will have it completed for you for next week. We just need to work out some final details. But the other provisions of the agreement then, we actually work with our folks at the high school, work with the students to make sure they get the training. There's some provisions there through what the IU will provide. And then on the very last page, it puts in some, special considerations. So making sure the kids are at least 14 years old, that they are going to be supervised, that if there would be anything like a cleaning that they were going to do, that we would make sure that they get the proper education and training on the cleaning product. Making sure that they have proper PPE dress, that kind of thing. So if they'd be working on something, then they need gloves or wearing closed-toed shoes. All of that would be taken care of. And so I think that's the end of the agreement then. Yeah. So again, not new to other districts, but new for us. Think it's a great opportunity for the kids, great opportunity for us to kind of get some help, and hopefully a win-win.
I noticed an article in the paper that reviewed the janitorial services that the kids are used for in some districts. It said the teachers came back and said the rooms were cleaner than they had been before.
So with a situation like this, SOSL is used to, have they already been working with kids?
Well, the interesting part is when we started down this path, the first idea we had was to have SOS join as one of the IU's business partners. But then we pay a markup to SOS for the staff, so we said, SOS actually came back and said, if you just do it direct, then you take, and because it's not like employment where we're not paying an hourly wage and taxes, Social Security, that kind of thing. We're paying the IU the stipend and they're taking care of all that. So that makes more sense for us to do it that way. Now, kids that we're going to hire after school. So I think there was one of the article in the paper I didn't think did a really good job of differentiating. There are two types of use of students. So one is this. The other is students who want to work after school and maybe don't have a ride to a job. It's easier for them to work for the district because they just stay. And then they can, get picked up or, get a ride with a friend or whatever the case may be. In that instance, we will be going through SOS. And that's the other piece that we don't have quite all built out yet. But we've been working with the folks at the high school, did a nice flyer put together to advertise. And it's not going to be full shifts, we'll kind of split it up. And really just looking to hire kids to work after school to make some cash, to, again, help us keep everything running, but then, get them some job experience as well. So this is a little bit different because this is our special education students working in this program. And the other program could be any student who, isn't involved in the music or, sport or something like that.
There's a lot of this sort of work with these kids.
You do.
Yeah. Well, that's always the concern is that no matter whatever capacity kids are involved in this, that they're just protected and followed up with and stuff.
Yep.
And that the people, particularly outside of the IU-13, know they're training kids and not regular employees.
The
Because that
IU
also takes a
has,
special person.
Somewhere between 100 and 200 businesses in Lancaster County that they have these kids in, so they're very trained in how to deal with the kids and the employers that take them in.
Okay, all right. Yeah, that was only my question, just to make sure
Absolutely.
that they have a good experience when they're doing it.
Yeah.
Both
And they're not dealing with their mentors like, marriage problems and kids problems while they're working.
That's what I have personal experience, because when I was fresh out of college 20 years ago, I ran a store and we had the IU-13 kids come in on Monday, and they had a handler, she brought them on a bus. I didn't have to do anything. They came in, they had their jobs, and then they left after like 2 hours. So I dealt with this 20 years ago from the other side.
Yeah, okay.
IU runs a wonderful program with this, and there's some wonderful partners who do this year after year. Absolutely.
That's cool.
Okay. All right. Yep.
Mrs. Tozer.
All right, I'm gonna do my best to control my enthusiasm. This first contract is one of my areas of passion in education. So we're going to talk a little bit about First 10. We've been introducing you to this concept as we've worked through our ESSER plans, thinking about First 10 as the first 10 years of a child's life. And so county-wide and region-wide, school districts have been working with the Education Development Center, EDC, the contract you see in front of you, to develop what they call their First 10 community plans. So we're meeting with Community Action Partnership, who runs home visiting programs. We're meeting with Head Start. We're meeting with early learning providers across our district to really align our processes for families so that we can, one, open up access to more pre-K and early learning opportunities, but then number two, when we do have those programs, making sure that we are setting up that continuum of services. So a family can reduce the number of times they need to hand in all their paperwork, reduce the number of times they need to go through conversations around early intervention or special education. So the First 10 framework really serves to better engage families from the school district side of things so that we're able to get students the supports and the resources earlier on. This piece is right out of our ARP ESSER plan that we had presented. We have First 10 work built into all 3 years. We are considering it part of our accelerated learning system. One of the things that we noticed about our kindergartners is, I mean, we think, you look at each group of students and how they were impacted with this pandemic, right? Our kindergartners are no different. Child care centers took a hit in this pandemic. Students kids were not able to be vaccinated. They weren't able to have any of the precautionary things that we had in other levels of the system. And so a lot of child care centers were closed for lengthy periods of time, or they shut down altogether. And we see that. We're seeing that impact now on our kindergartners coming in. And so specifically, we know that this work will jumpstart and bring our kiddos up to where they need to be coming into kindergarten. So Education Development Center, David Jacobson, he's a national consultant. He currently works with multiple school districts in Lancaster County as part of the P3, prenatal to third grade. It's another phrase for First 10 framework that's happening across the county. He also works in York County and in Lebanon County as well with school districts. So he's become our regional expert. So this contract is to begin and get our first advisory team together and start looking at a community asset map, looking at the partners we have, and beginning to prioritize and develop our First 10 plan.
I really like the idea that you're all coordinating it, because oftentimes services are so fractured.
Yes.
My other question is, you said you're doing this with ESSER funds. What happens when they're gone?
So the goal of this is to take these 3 years to action plan and build our committee so that we have that coordination. It's not an expensive thing once you get the group together and you do the mapping and the resources and you're aligning. There are so many different organizations that are offering these services. It's really in bringing the team together and identifying what outcomes you want to see and putting that action plan in place.
United Way used to have something by 6.
That's Success by 6, you got it.
Success by 6, so they part of this too.
They were a huge partner in starting this work at the county.
Pediatricians in town.
Yep. So Community Action Partnership, United Way, they were the 2 organizations that really led the way in working with the school districts in Lancaster and Lebanon County to get this work off the ground.
Okay. Sounds good. Any questions? Next program.
Okay, and the last piece is just a very small contract here, but this kind of completes our work that we're taking on with curriculum with the IU13. So this is now our math technical assistance piece. We've already approved the science and STEM. We've approved the ELA. We're on our 3rd piece, which is the math. And you can see this is a significantly reduced amount because we've done so much of the back end planning with the IU and the other 2 areas that we're now able to take the systems and the processes that we've put in place for math and STEM and reduce the amount of IU support that's needed based on the work that we did in those first 2 areas. So again, just a small contract. They're going to do some back-end work for us in curriculum and resource selection.
Questions?
And this is all consent for next week, correct?
Mhm. All of these are for next week's consent agenda.
That's the only question I had.
So thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Curtis.
Thanks.
Dr. Mann, you're back up again.
This is a contract with IU13 to help us finish the year working with our PIMS, which is Pennsylvania Information Management System, so PIMS. That's where all our data is processed and uploaded through the state. Mrs. Forrest, who recently resigned and took a position in another district, was our PIMS coordinator here. And so with her gone, we need to, and we're in the process of hiring someone. I need help getting it finished, getting us across the line for the rest of the year. Now, this contract takes us through August, because starting now is really like a heavy submission time of year. And then at the end of the year, there's a lot of cleaning up that needs to be done, as well as, for example, the safe school reports that have to go up and all that takes place in June. So, you know, in the event we're able to hire someone and able to transition, you know, that we can back out of this, but I don't necessarily see that happening. I mean, until, you know, we get to the end.
So is this really just general kind of like contracted help just to assist you with all of those processes?
Yes.
Okay.
It's amazing how this part of it has just grown over the years.
Bill the reporting mandate.
Yes.
It's a lot of information. I'd rather have Dr. Mann do other things than this kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
So would I.
That's fine.
Okay, this is an action item. Can I have a motion to approve this agreement?
Motion to approve the agreement.
Second.
We have a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Benito?
Aye.
Mrs. Kafka?
Aye.
Mr. Towery?
Aye.
Mr. Dillman?
Aye.
Mr. Gensel?
Aye.
Mr. Hurst?
Alright.
Dr. Martin?
Aye.
Ms. Trowbridge?
Aye.
Mrs. Grawl?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's just have a refresher. The STS addendum.
Right, I'm back. Okay, last two items from me, hopefully, right? STS addendum, so this matches the contract that we have with STS, so if you pull it up and compare it, it's the same. The second page of it, though, lists the rates. And so essentially what we're doing by virtue of this addendum, and Dr. Z can weigh in, but we've been having a lot of discussions countywide about the per diem substitute rate. Our current rate is $120 a day. We're taking that up to $130. And that's in line with what other districts in the IU are doing as well. And then the other one, Dr. Z had already introduced Scott Rank to you, and we do not currently have a rate in place with STS for an interim assistant principal. We have hired interim people through a variety of mechanisms. We have used STS, we have used SOS, and we've also used PASBO on my side, which is the Association of School Business Administrators, but we did not have a rate for an interim assistant principal, so we had to come up with one for that. Again, kind of talking to other folks in the IU to figure out how that transpires. So this will be on consent for next week, but those are the two functions of this simplistic addendum.
I especially like the parts you explained that they're looking at other ways to make substituting more attractive.
Yes. Yeah, and that's a much bigger discussion. We're not looking just at increasing the rate. And we're going to have a whole discussion kind of administrative-wide about everybody bringing a piece to the table to make that more robust and attractive for the substitutes.
We may want to look at some past practices we had too.
Yep. Yeah, we have a pretty lengthy list. If you have any you want to send to us, we'll be more than happy to add them to the list.
Just a quick question about the substitutes. When you have, are there any people that like just want to substitute for a specific school district?
Oh,
Yes.
absolutely. Absolutely. I know when I did it, I never got morning phone calls. I did all my scheduling in advance.
Okay.
You know, and at one time we had a program where we actually had a permanent sub stationed in the middle school and the high school. So you always knew you had one, and if you get the right person in that, it really works well. We had others where we contracted them, they had a guarantee us X number of days a year, and if they did that, they got a bonus. many ways and if you talk to the subs, they'll tell you what about how your
Yes.
sub works that is awkward or difficult, so that you can fix it.
The biggest challenge for the substitute issue is how to make sure that we're getting the number of substitutes increased. I mean, it's a supply and demand issue, right? We can throw all the money we want at it, but if we're not increasing the number, all we're doing is paying the limited group of people more money.
Yeah.
Which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it doesn't help us get there to be more people. That's why when you saw the superintendent's report tonight and there were 3 additions and they were in that Act 86 category, when we weren't gonna let those wait till next week because we could use those folks yet this week. That's something as we get them, we definitely make sure we update that. Sorry, Dr. Z, you're gonna
What we're saying,
jump
what we're
in.
seeing is we have those committed subs, that they love CV, they love working here, the kids are great, the teachers are great. But then we have some new people coming in and they're saying, we love CV, but effort is paying $150. Or somebody else is paying more than, and we've tried as superintendents to try to keep a range where, because we don't want an arms race, we want to be able to keep the people we have, and so right now, it's a logical progression to the 130.
Okay.
Yeah, because if
Trying to find
you
that.
live in a CV area, you don't necessarily want to stuff in Calico or Salina.
Right.
But,
So do we feel that the 130 is appropriate? I mean,
Yes.
somebody's paying 150?
the 150,
150 is pretty limited. There's only one or
that
two
temporary?
yeah,
doing
there's
it.
a handful, even effort is good, 150, but they're gonna drop back down. Next year, they're using their ESSER fund for substitutes, and they haven't seen a large increase in substitutes either.
Correct.
Yeah, it's not just money.
It's not just money
It's not
now,
just money.
but we're getting ideas, I know it's part of the principals meeting tomorrow on the agenda. We're also talking with the teachers, because when Mrs. Mulvihill said, you know, we have ideas, we want their ideas. What can they do as teachers to make that substitute feel more comfortable and welcome? So it is truly gonna take all of us to increase that number.
Okay, next 2 items are related. If you remember when we, went into the middle school project, there were some documents through our land development process that we had to approve with East Lampeter. So as you've been following along, now that we're looking at Leola and the existing middle school, you're gonna start to see some of those same sorts of documents come forward for those 2 buildings. In this case, tonight, the document that you have in front of you that is the stormwater management agreement is with Upper Laycock. It's for Leola. This is their standard boilerplate agreement that they ask everybody to sign off on when they're doing projects within the township. Dr. Z, if you just scroll just back up to the top of that page, please. Okay, so that chart, it starts on the previous page and there's an example here. One of the things as we were looking at these documents that Mr. Frankhauser advised is that the agreement generally refers to some of these operation and maintenance procedures. And he said, gee, it'd be nice if you could just stick the actual ones into the template, so there's not any confusion down the line about who said what and what needs to happen and what schedule it needs to happen on. And so they sent us the document, and K&W engineers included the actual chart that we're gonna follow into this. So again, standard template with Mr. Frankhauser's recommendation there. So let me stop on that one, and then, as I said, the next item is related, but it's the escrow agreement that sort of kind of comes along with this. So any questions on the stormwater management easement before I move to the financial side of it?
Take this vote?
Do you want to do that one and then I'll explain the other thing, or do you want me to explain them both and then?
That matters to you or not.
Okay, how about I explain them both and then we can
Okay.
act however the board desires. So then the next piece of that is, again, remembering what we had to do with East Lampeter and the land development, then there's typically some sort of financial security that needs to be put in place. And it's really intended that the municipality knows we're not gonna start a project and like leave things open and just walk away from it. So it's really more like for developers than it is for somebody like us as a school district, but just by ordinance, it applies to everybody, so it applies to us. Because, you know, we're like not going anywhere, right? But we have to follow this. So in this particular case, because the amount of work, you know, we're not, you know, doing the kind of land development work that we were doing for a brand new middle school. There's some limited, as K&W's explained before, some limited stormwater work that will be done over at Leola. And so there's a calculation that they come up with what the appropriate financial security would be for that. And that's $129,000. So we have two options with that. You can either go to the bank and get her a letter of credit to put that in place, or you can simply give the township a check and it goes into an escrow account. I will tell you the history is, and it was a much more substantial number when we did it with East Lampeter, but the exercise that we tried to get through and ended up not getting through with the bank to get a letter of credit in place was fairly painful, and we ended up saying that it's costing too much time and money. Can't we just put a check in place to secure it? We did that at East Lampeter. Again, it was a much more sizable amount. What they have done as we've hit certain benchmarks across the projects is they've released some of that financial security back to us. So I think we've gone to them 3 times and had some money released. And there may be an opportunity to do that yet again, but there will be a pot of it that will sit until the project's complete and everything's buttoned up to the satisfaction of the township, the conservation district, all the parties in place for the land piece of it. In this case, again, much less number because of the size of what we're doing, but same theory applies. They actually wanted us to get a letter of credit. We asked the question, can we just do the escrow instead? It's sort of easier and cheaper to do it that way. So the escrow account will be set up, that they won't be able to use it for any township purposes. It's specifically for this purpose. We will give them the deposit of the $129,000 and they'll essentially sit on it until they have satisfaction that, again, all the stormwater stuff has been put in place to, you know, everybody's satisfaction. They release the money back to us. So what you have in front of you is not only the escrow agreement, but then the resolution that you need to approve to put everything in place. And the second page of the resolution is actually an appendix to attach the agreement. So what makes most sense is for you to pass the agreement first and then the resolution that has the agreement within it. So, Mrs. Groff, to your point, if we now want to sort of, I apologize, backtrack and do the stormwater management agreement, and then we can do the escrow and the resolution.
Okay, I'll take a motion to approve the stormwater water management agreement as posted.
Motion to approve the stormwater management agreement.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
In a second. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Benigno?
Aye.
Mrs. Kafka?
Aye.
Mr. Talley?
Aye.
Mr. Dillon?
Aye.
Mr. Gensel?
Aye.
Mr. Hurst?
Aye.
Dr. Martin?
Aye.
Ms. Trowbridge?
Aye.
Mrs. Crawl?
Okay, now you want this one in 2 separate votes?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, first you want the escrow agreement approved?
And then the resolution, please.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I should have asked before, is this amount carried as a line item in the construction cost for the project?
So tell me what you mean by carried.
So is this 129 in the budget for the construction?
Oh, yes.
project?
Mhm.
Okay.
And I would say not to the penny because it's an estimate of when we do the budget, but yes, it's included in all of the costs of the project.
And you don't apologize, right up until we take the vote, even after the motion to open the budget.
Yeah, so you need a,
Some people don't know when to get a question in, but that's always there.
so you need the agreement, and what's the other one that you need?
The other will be
The resolution.
Resolution,
You need them separate, correct?
yes,
And that's the Upper Leacock escrow resolution, correct?
yes.
Yep.
Okay, good, all right, I'll take care of it.
Okay, we have a motion
I-
and a second for this resolution, roll
I
call vote
moved.
please.
I didn't do a motion yet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I just wanted to write down what you
She's ready to
needed.
go, come on, Marty, let's go.
I'm done, all right, I'll move that we approve the Upper Leacock form escrow agreement. Second. First one.
Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Benigno?
Aye.
Mrs. Kafka?
Aye.
Mr. Talley?
Aye.
Mr. Dillman?
Aye.
Mr. Gensel?
Aye.
Mr. Hurst?
Aye.
Dr. Martin?
Aye.
Ms. Trowbridge? Mrs. Crawl?
Aye.
Okay, then I'll move that we approve the Upland escrow resolution.
Thank you.
Second. Roll call vote.
Mr. Benigno?
Aye.
Mrs. Kafka?
Aye.
Mr. Talley?
Aye.
Mr. Dillman?
Aye.
Mr. Gensel?
Aye.
Mr. Hurst?
Aye.
Dr. Martin?
Aye.
Ms. Trowbridge? Mrs. Crawl?
Aye.
Thank you. We're having so much fun.
I appreciate, I know most people have left, but for those who presented, I appreciate their being as focused as they were. That was a lot of work to get done in a short amount of time. Okay, review the board agenda. Any questions about next week's agenda? If not, is there anyone left who would like to address the board? Are there any board matters anyone would like to bring up? Any concerns? If not, I will take a motion to adjourn to executive session for both legal and personnel reasons.
So moved.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? If not, we are adjourned.